Yeah.
I just, okay. I was thinking maybe we could just wait a couple more minutes.
Hey, how's it going?
Thank you. One more minute or so. It seems like it is leveled off on Zoom, so we'll go ahead and get started. Let's go around maybe and have staff introduce themselves from here, and on Zoom knows who we are, and then we can jump in. So I'll serve. Debbie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Debbie Alvarez, Public Works.
One Owens, Public Works. I'm Annie Grant. I'm an assistant city attorney.
And Brian Oxley, Assistant Public Works Director.
Bruce Mulder, Parks and Recreation Director.
Emo Gonzalez, Park Planner.
City staff first, go for it, sorry.
Georgia Megasmith, Assistant City Manager.
Erin Morris, Community Development Director.
Would you guys like to introduce yourself?
Justin just discussed it.
Justin Cole, with utilities.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, Vince Bossy, Philippi Engineering.
Rich Alexander, representing the race property.
David Guy's resident.
Kyle Siegel, KB Homes.
Mick DuPont, Discovery Builders.
Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you everyone on Zoom. At the outset, housekeeping, I'll say, if you have a question on Zoom or a comment, if you could just raise your hand, and then I will keep track of who's got their hand raised and we will call on you at an appropriate time. So just to table set briefly before we get into the presentation, I think much of the information today will be similar as the last meeting, but we have tried to address some of the questions and comments that we got last time in today's presentation and discussion and agenda. So feel free to, you're here to take your comments, your feedback. We are not making decisions at this meeting, as I know you all know from last time, but we will be taking everything you say, incorporating it into the feedback that we are bringing to council, the presentation we're bringing to council. All the information will be shared with council. So know that you are being listened to. We may not be able to make promises or final decisions today, but we are taking all the information you're giving us and we are incorporating that into our presentation. As we said last time, council will be the final decision maker on this. Staff implements their policy, we don't set it. So we're here for your feedback to answer questions to the extent we can. Some of the questions might be larger policy questions that won't be answered until council hears and makes a decision on this item. So, and the last thing I'll say is, again, the presentation you'll hear today, these are the maximum fee amounts that are supported by the study that we had done. It does not mean these are the final fee amounts that will necessarily be charged. There's policy setting within the range. So I just wanted to set the table with all that again. Please be respectful and patient. We'll call on everyone. You will have a chance to speak, I promise. So with that, I will start off with number one, which is the DIF update. And then I'll mention here that in between last meeting and this meeting, the city has put together and posted on the webpage a number of FAQs and informational documents that are intended to be a helpful resource in understanding the city's specific study and processes in DIF, or generally how it's reported, how it's accounted, where the city keeps the money, how the city spends the money, we tried to put up, I think there's maybe 10 or so new documents on that site. So if you haven't seen them yet, we worked hard on them to give you more information. So those are available on the website now, and we will probably keep updating them and adding things as we do these meetings. Okay, so for today, we are gonna give an overview of the proposed DIF update. That includes the numbers themselves, but also the fee ordinance update that we're taking, which has a lot of the policy setting within that ordinance. So the deferrals, the reductions in fees, things like that, those all come out of the ordinance that will also be going to council. We're gonna be talking about the service fee schedule, which is different than the DIP, but a related important part. And then we're gonna talk about development review process improvements, which are the more customer facing, you know, you guys tell us if there's things that we can improve on. We're continuing to work, you know, closely with our departments on how we can serve you guys, our customers. So those are all the things we will be covering today. So I will turn it over, and I think we're gonna do the presentation first here.
Yeah, Typhion.
Yeah, thank you. Good. Can you hear me okay? Okay, great. Yeah, Typhion Rice Evans with Economic and Planning Systems. Next slide, please. So yeah, Annie, I think you mentioned an extensive set of questions from last time and an extensive set of responses online that are all available. Next slide, please. So in terms of the potential changes to the fee program, they're kind of two buckets. Sorry, yeah, thank you. One is some structural changes to how the fee is proposed to be charged, and the second is the discussion of the maximum fee level. So just to start and recap briefly on some of the changes to the structural approach. One of the things that we did back in 2022 was to change from a flat per unit single family detached fee to a fee by size tiers, with the idea that we want to be able to provide lower fees where possible to smaller units. State law has since asked us to go further and basically enact fees on a per square foot basis, so very proportional to the size of single family units. So that's one of the structural changes that's embedded in the 2025 potential update that you'll see, again, in the hopes that that'll help continue to help spur smaller homes and perhaps more missing middle housing in the city. One other adjustment that was also made was in the transportation fee. Previously, we had single family detached and multifamily. Transportation consultants have identified an appropriate downward adjustment for single family attached based on their trip rate. So you'll see within transportation impact fee category only, there's a lower fee for transportation or single family attached, also based on a per square foot basis. So those are a couple of structural changes. And then now I think next slide, please, we can move into the technical work. As Annie said, this is a look at the potential percentage changes if the council were choose to enact fees at the maximum possible level. The technical approach taken here is kind of the standard one taking in fee programs throughout California, where basically the technical work is to identify what are the policy requirements, what are the levels of service, what is the list of improvements, what are the cost estimates. You put it all together and you try to figure out you develop a fair share on new development and you come up with a maximum potential fee. Again, those fees are maximum potential, and there's a lot of room for conversation about, and I'll talk a little bit more about some of the things that can be changed within these fee programs. But anyway, as you can see, there are substantive potential increases to a lot of fee programs. Sewer and water, roughly at 20%, traffic at about 70%. Some of the other ones, police, fire, almost doubling. So clearly a significant potential increase if we do adopt the maximum fees. Next slide, please. And I think here maybe Parks was going to talk a little bit about the Parks fee.
Yeah, we just wanted to chime in and say, essentially identify what our role is in this process. We met with Gwen. We translated the policy documents. That includes the parks element of the general plan and the updated Parks and Rec master plan. And we essentially provided that information, interpreted the information to make sure that EPS can correctly evaluate what previous city councils have approved. But we attended the last meeting. We didn't participate, but we heard what you had to say. And one of the things that we are doing, Bruce, my director, and I, we're evaluating some alternatives to bring to council. And this includes feasibility for projects in terms of scope and whether the project can actually move forward or not. And essentially what we're hoping to get out of this meeting would be more feedback. We've been copied on some emails. I'm reading through that. I'm evaluating some of the costs in a more detailed fashion on this side of the last meeting, but here to gather more information so that we can continue to explore alternatives to bring to council.
All right, thank you. Next slide, please. So in terms of, again, these maximum fees as calculated, here are the kind of those translations of those percentages into actual fee levels. We haven't shown totals yet because, as you just heard, Parks and Rec is still under kind of consideration and discussion, so we didn't want to give a total that was not fully inclusive. But you can certainly see here some of the scale of some of the changes with, for example, the traffic fee going up by about $11,000 per unit, the water fee potentially going up by a few $1,000s per unit, et cetera. So it's collectively there's, $20,000 per unit or so change potentially in there before we include Parks and Rec. And again, that would just be the maximum fee, not necessarily the adopted fee. Next slide, please. Yeah, so one of the things we just wanted to kind of emphasize in the work is the fee calculations, the maximum fee calculations are really tied to your project list, your service standard, and your cost estimates. And those are hopefully laid out relatively clearly for each fee in the Nexus study, so everybody can look at them and kind of evaluate all of those different components and different projects, et cetera, that have been included. The biggest change that we want to kind of emphasize that's driven the changes from what was adopted in 2022 to 2025 have been the cost increases that many of you will be familiar with. The 2022 study did not use really the latest or kind of most up-to-date numbers. So we're really talking about numbers that were established back in 2018 or so. And I think for most of us who've been around in this world, 2018 to 2025, we very much understand that there were some very major increased cost drivers, whether including the pandemic and all that came with it, including the supply chain challenges. You include the regulatory changes, some big federal pushes to do infrastructure development. And in the Bay Area, this obviously was happening beforehand, a major loss of labor force that also has pushed up the cost of labor. So those are some of the key reasons why the maximum fee level has gone up so much from where we sit. And next slide, please.
So, I got it. So this slide just goes over some of the cost increases that we've had. So basically, when we have line items, they're based upon bid prices. They're based upon bid prices that we have from, we researched Elk Grove, Alameda, Stockton, Caltrans, et cetera, because when we build a project, we don't have the ability to negotiate with the contractor. We go with the lowest common bid. So these are just some of the categories that went up. I will provide a write-up with this, with all of the bid costs, because some of them stayed the same, some of them went up. They didn't go up equally, and this is what we used in 2019 to 2024. And you can see that like roadway excavation went from $40 a cubic yard to $100 a cubic yard. So just kind of want to give you context. Same thing, like earth import went from $50 a cubic yard to $150 a cubic yard. So it's 3 times as much. So when you saw the 300 and everyone was very upset last time, this gives you an order of magnitude of what we're talking about. And it's just for that particular line item. So once again, I will provide a write-up that has all of our unit costs, what we assumed in 2019 and what we assumed in 2024. And the fact that we're constrained by what the bid price comes in as.
Thanks, Gwen. Yeah, so just to kind of wrap up I think to Gwen's point there and the broader point, there's a whole technical structure around which the maximum fee is calculated. but obviously there are changes that could be made based on policy direction. So for example, if we were to change or adjust a service standard or remove certain projects that everyone agreed were not, the cost benefit ratio was not sufficient, all of those things would reduce our calculation of the maximum fee. So that's one set of, that's kind of one common direction for policymakers to consider as they consider fee increases and potential moderations in them. Another approach is what we call more of, rather than changing the level of service or the project list, is a policy-based fee reduction, where the council can just say, we're okay with this list of projects, but we just want to reduce the fee level. That is doable and done. What it does do, because we keep the same list, is basically saying now the city is going to look for funding from other sources, additional funding from other sources, which can be challenging. So obviously you want to think about that approach, or the city council will think about that approach as part of its deliberations. And then finally, and this is common, whether the fees are, with many fee programs, is there's often a desire to kind of buffer current projects that are currently in the mix, that have maybe already made a series of decisions from facing immediate and sudden increases. So we'll often see city councils choose to phase in their fee programs to whatever level it may be, but they may phase it over a period of time to provide some buffer. So those are just a few of the many thoughts and options that will be kind of deliberated, I'm sure, at the council level. Next slide. I think that's it for me, Annie.
Thank you, Typhoon. So this, I think, is just reiterating, we have taken some of the information we got from the last meeting, we incorporated those into the FAQs, which are on the website. This presentation will be posted after today, so if you need the link, although I think it's in the same place, it should be also defined, but presentation will be posted, the recording of this meeting will be posted, the recording of the last meeting is available. We're trying to put all of the information we can in response to the feedback we're getting up ahead of time, and then we'll continue to accept the feedback, continue to change our approach. So I think that's all this slide was intended for. And then if we want to pause here for any questions about anything we've covered so far. You're on Zoom, if you want to raise your hand on Zoom.
I've got one question. How come we're just now getting this agenda? How come, it would have been nice if we could have had it about a week in advance to where we could go through it and be able to respond to some of this. We're waiting for write-ups, we're waiting for things, and we've got 5 days to go through this.
Thank you for the question, Rich. We've had the information available on the website. Literally, as we receive questions, we're responding to them and posting them back on the website. So we've had multiple customers sending us queries based on them looking at what we have up there. And it's basically been evolving as we receive inquiries. So essentially, our website has been a living space, whereas we get your input and your questions, we are responding, rather than us gathering everything in a humongous batch and posting it a few minutes before this meeting. So the agenda does outline today's plan of events, but the materials have been available on a rolling basis as they're being developed. And I guess I'd also just say there's no pressure on you all to get everything done by May 20th. That will be our next informational meeting, and it is a chance to ask more questions, but you don't need to wait till May 20th to ask questions. I mean, I'm sorry, Vince, I'm going to call you out as one of our really good active participators. Vince has been sending us questions, not on a daily basis, but on a semi-daily basis for the last couple of weeks, and we encourage that. We don't want you to wait. After May 20th, after the next meeting, we might collect some additional questions and comments. We go to council. We're not shutting down questions and comments. We're going to continue to collect and respond as we work our way through this process over the rest of the year.
And the first thing that goes to council is not going to be, here's everything that's about the fee. We're going to have, I know for sure, multiple sessions that we're taking council where we start at square one. We sort of present to them again all of this. I think we're kind of going with the DIP 101 approach. We bring them in at that ground level. We bring all of you in. It's going to be a public meeting, just like every other council meeting. You'll be able to comment at that meeting. We're going to have another informational meeting with them. There will be several meetings with council before we ever even get to asking them to look at adopting the actual fee. So there will be lots of opportunities to participate. We sometimes are working on the presentation to make it the most up to date up until the meeting. So we will always post it for you as soon as we have it.
Is there an approximate time frame you guys have in mind for actual adoption of this?
Yeah, I think the latest, and obviously, as you know, subject to change potentially, but I think June, we're gonna take a couple of informational sessions to council, just Q&A, feedback, nothing substantive, in terms of decision making. I would anticipate maybe August is the earliest that we would take the actual meeting, unless anyone has heard anything different, but that I think is my impression of the timeline.
Brian actually is the one who, Brian McLean is the one who has the schedule, and my understanding of the schedule is that we do 101 in June, then in July, August, do some policies, and I'm thinking that they're looking at longer time frame to actually adopt it, but Brian, by that, because he's one mission, you know, in control of the schedule. But he's out of town right now, but we'll get that to you.
Yeah.
And actually, just real quick aside, so at the May 27th council meeting, a diff roadmap is going to council, an informational item that will outline all kind of those dates when it's going to council, so that might be helpful.
All right, excuse me, are any existing projects exempt from these potential increases?
Yeah, so the timing of that, the timing of that is based on typically building permits, or it can change. It's kind of a nuanced answer based on the type of project, but generally, if the project is ready to build or the diffs are going, then no, the diffs won't retroactively kick in. It's all about when you're pulling, you know, your permits and your entitlements, but it's.
And typically what will end up happening is, when council adopts whatever the update is, then usually there's a lag period of, you know, it could be 3 months, 6 months. Last time when we did it in 2022, I think it was a year for single family. And then other ones, depending upon the fee, you could choose either the old fee or the new fee, depending upon which one's more beneficial, because we did change it to the household range size. So there, if you build a smaller house, your fees would be lower with the newer diff when we went 2022. So those are all policy decisions that council will make on how it's going to be rolled out.
But
So
if
is
your
there-
building permit issue, you are
Well,
protected
yeah,
from fee change,
of
to
course.
answer your question very correct.
I'm sorry, I missed that. What you
If the
just-
building permit has been issued, you're protected from any future fee hikes.
So the trigger is building permit, not
Once the building permit is issued, we can't go back. So that's just a bottom line, right line, boundary for the diff.
And we can put some discussion on this into our next.
Yeah, we should.
Would
So
you guys
this-
consider a scenario where a building permit was applied for?
That's a policy decision for the council, and that's something that we can certainly look into.
Yeah, we'll.
And those have an expiration date, and that might be a tool for some of your permit holders to identify what's in the immediate horizon and prevent, you know,
A lot.
a shock on what's immediately in the pipeline
Absolutely.
with a finite life period.
Yeah, we'll put some discussion of all the different ways this can play out into it. I thank you.
And so this was one of my questions also, is staff gonna have a recommendation for council for that quote unquote lag period, be it 3 months, 6 months, whatever it is, when you,
We will eventually, yes. Right now, we're still.
but you don't have any
collecting-
idea what that would be?
No, and actually, it's helpful to have feedback. I mean, I can just guess that if I'm in the development community, I want the data to be as far out as possible, and I want as much flexibility as possible, but that's absolutely something that staff will noodle along with your input, and we'll have options, and recommendations for council. on what we
Chris Young.
Got it. Okay, so sorry, I was jotting notes and questions as this was going through. You had mentioned, I think in one of the slides, that the smaller homes will actually see a reduction in fee. So right now we have the zones,
It's by square footage. So.
right? Before we have the ranges, and now it's a strict square foot per square foot fee ratio. Does the city know where the break even point is? You know, obviously, we've seen in the report, a 2,500 square foot is increasing in fee.
So the average is 2,500 square feet.
But that sees an increase. My question is with the new fee at 1,600 square feet, at 1,400, where does it even out? And going below that is actually a lower fee. Have you looked at that and seen where that puts you?
So the only one caveat regarding square footage is it doesn't apply to sewer and water, because water is basically your the size of your connection and such.
Got it.
So, and sewer, we couldn't find, and both sewer and water, because they're utilities, the state provides the exemption for them. And with all the other ones, we could provide a nexus as to the size of the house, how many people would be in the house, but sewer and water doesn't work that way.
Well, and the reason I asked that question about a break even or, you know, maybe not to the general square foot is I know there are builders building homes now that are worried that I've got a couple more years of future permits. This is going to affect me at some point in time. And if they know the current product I'm producing today out in my subdivision is a 1,600 square foot and the update really won't affect me that much, you know, that's something they may want to know. And if they're building 3,000 square footers and they're going to see a $50,000 increase, they'll want to know that as well, along with the dates and the lead times and the lag periods and those sorts of things. So, or a new developer coming in and they're proposing a product, they're going to want to, you know, figure out where they are in the scheme relative to what they've been doing maybe.
Yes, I appreciate your point, and I just want to respond that we've also heard from Tom that part of why the city should be adjusting the fees based on square footage is to make it easier for people to build smaller homes. So we should do some work and some math on with the new fees, will it in fact reduce the fees for smaller homes? And so I think that's another takeaway from your comments that I'll put on our list, because that's a valid point that has come to the council numerous times over the last couple of years.
Well, it sounds like it is. It's just, I
Yeah,
don't know where
we'll
that
confirm
is.
that,
Is
though.
that all the way down at 1,100 square feet or is it an 1,800 square
Yeah.
foot? Or where does the benefit?
Well,
or
that's what
break-even
I think
point
that's what
come
we're
in?
gonna have to figure out ahead of time. Because right now, it looks like, you know, we want to raise the fees up so that when we build the smallest home, we're still paying more than the existing fees. And we've got to find that break even point. Because like he says, I mean, it may be down to a 900 square foot home in order for what we made decisions on.
We have 1,000 square foot break and 2,000 square foot break in the current schedule for the traffic fees. This is about micro being it, so that it really does change based on house size, so you don't have an incentive to build a smaller home. So again, we'll do that. And Vince, I know you're gonna be all over that math too, so we can compare math with folks. But I think it is gonna be an important question for the council, that impact of the per square footage fee on smaller single family homes, and does it help make them more feasible for the builders?
Are you guys considering going to straight square footage? And I apologize if this information is out there and I just haven't found it yet. It may be.
It is by square footage.
Would that be for ADUs as well?
ADUs are different. I think we're constrained by some legal things.
Sub 700.
So Aaron, I went back and looked, I had asked you about ADUs and Mick, I think that there's an ordinance update, and I should have communicated with you on this, Mick, but it says specifically it's a ratio of the ADU square footage to the home, and easy math would be if it's a 1,600 square foot home, 800 square foot ADU, those fees would be exactly half then in that case, or by way of example.
Under 750.
Or under 750 is.
No, they're exempt typically.
The equivalent dwelling unit, I follow, just the math is it's a little tricky. And that might be a little easier to figure out if it was just straight square foot. I don't know if that is a positive or negative impact. I'm just wondering if that's part of the conversation too, is the ADU.
Yeah, and this will be helpful. We'll put this in more clear terms. I think we are pretty constrained by the way the state has told us we have to calculate ADU fees. Most cities, I think, just do a straight proportion. They would take a percentage of the size against the house and just do the math that way. But there are cities that have taken slightly alternative approaches that have been endorsed by HCD. So we will at least look at what the options are and then include those in a.
I think what I'm hearing you say, Mick, is that the simpler it is, the clearer it is, the better it is. But I think that would also go if the fee seems reasonable.
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily, I'm not seeking to simplify. I have a bunch of ADUs and it was a little tricky to figure out the language with how you determine what EDU applies based on the square footage of the primary. It was just a little nebulous. And maybe this is an opportunity to identify really how it should read. I think the way you're describing it now as a ratio probably works, because that in reality, that's more reflective of the actual impact. It's not, you're not adding, it's not a 1-for-1 per square foot. I'm just wondering where that stands and if that's something that we can revisit, because it was just, we
Absolutely.
went back and forth 100 times on
And we can loop in our building official who worked with
Yeah.
you and got you through in the end.
Yeah, we
But
got
It
to
did
the
take a
bottom
lot,
of
it
it.
did take a lot of conversation for ADUs, which is something our housing element is actually calling for, something that the city wants to have happen, so.
So I do want to ask a couple TIF questions, and if we're done on that. So number one, you had a slide up where it showed where your unit costs were being driven from, Gwen. That was Caltrans, Stockton, Alameda, Elk Grove, a couple I jotted down. Yeah, that slide there, right there, and some District 4 and other general Caltrans stuff I see. Did you guys use Vacaville projects and your own projects as a cost basis?
They do use some of ours. The only thing is there's a lot of times that we don't necessarily have projects that match what we such. And you also need to look at, you know, if you have a small project versus a large project, they're.
Well, and the scope of.
So, like I said, I will provide a write-up of all of the unit costs that we have. Some of them increased, some of them didn't increase, and, you know, just kind of how we went about that.
And you know, my thoughts are always, why look elsewhere when you can look at construction costs here in Vacaville? And I understand you don't have a matching project with a similar scope, similar size, and there's economy of scale that really doesn't exist on the small project. Understood, but if you do have those similarities, why not use your own cost? They presumably would be the most accurate, you know? So I just want to make sure, I know I had sent a email with 8 or 9 points on the TIF and some specifics in level of service, and I want to dive into every possible detail because I think it was pretty detailed in my email. But to the point of the FAQs, a couple of those I think had documents issued that probably would have answered those questions. So I'm not missing, like, you're not notifying when those FAQs are responded to or anything. We need to just keep kind of
We just
checking
launched
back
a new
daily.
website, and I have this feeling that there's gotta be some way to sign up when the page gets updated, but I haven't figured that out yet. The website's like 2 or 3 weeks old now. So we've been just, actually, Public Works has been producing them, legal and planning, we've been looking at them, and we just been trying to get them up as fast as possible, but have not always followed up with communication. I'll check in with our public relations person to see if there's a way you can sign up when the page change. That's a pretty old school tool that was in websites in the past. It feels like that's something that would be helpful.
I don't know how to do it. If there's a way, it'd be nice because it, you know, look and feel a lot of these things. So I will just say overridingly on the email I had sent on these things is some of the items seemed, I saw you had eliminated projects that had a low benefit to cost ratio, right? Like, hey, yeah, it's needed, but the benefit is so small. Why spend millions of dollars on this thing, which is appreciated. I had identified a couple more in there that I really think should be looked at, I think, and I spelled that out because it was, you know, yeah, we saved 3 seconds at a signal. Is that really worth a couple $1 million, you know, of funding? You know, it doesn't make sense to me to do that. So that was one of the items that was identified in there that, you know, a few seconds of time just doesn't seem like it's worth a
And
couple $1 million.
I'll get your email. I've just been trying to produce these as quick as possible.
Okay.
So,
The other ones is, you know, one of them maybe is an error, but, you know, reading the table, if you have a pre-development and a post-development level of service that remains the same. There was one that was still added into the TIF program. And so I didn't see that the new development was detrimental. Those sorts of things are what's in the email that I sent over. And then on Midway specifically was asking, it looked like Vaca Valley and the California overcrossing were evaluated as if the project never occurred. And you can see, you know, that there was no detriment to the level of service in the event development occurs if those projects did not build. And the question was, Midway is a really big cost in the TIF program, and it would seem worth it to see, you know, what if that didn't build or other lesser alternatives to some extent. So, you know, I don't know if that was looked at and evaluated, no project option, if you will, because it's so hefty.
California Open Crossing, those evaluations were done back in 2020 and such.
Okay.
So, I have to go back, and look at what all was done. I don't believe we looked at Midway. There's with the Vaca Valley Industrial Park, which is, Midway, like, New Banks and everything like that, that whole area. Because if we're having all this traffic, there's a fair amount of trucks that are using Midway, and it's only going to continue to get worse and such.
And are you saying they're using it, I understand that strip, I'll call it west in the industrial park, but the strip in between 505 and 80 is
Yeah.
seeing increased traffic volume.
Where we are, and we are seeing impacts from that. Since I started working at that a significant amount. So as I recollect, I don't think we looked at Midway because the focus last time, from what I heard, was the California Open Crossing and the Back Valley extension. So, but I will look through what we did back.
It's such a hefty cost, I would think it would warrant that kind of look that, or a lesser project, or the other thing I'd identified in the email was maybe there's a couple key intersections or the interchange that really do need to occur. But is additional lanes, doing a 4-lane with a 2-way left turn lane all the way through that long stretch really warranted? Could you improve a couple intersections and reduce the scope of the project and have a look at that? Because that widening is just, I looked at Street View and I've driven it before, the SID canal and the overhead wires and everything. It's a massive and it's long stretch of road to go and work on. And if it could be kept as 2 lanes for a majority of it at a minimum, that would be a really big savings. And like I said, I think that warrants a look at a reduced project. And like I said, I won't hit every sense here. So Leisure Town Road, and correct me if I'm wrong, both phase 1 and phase 2 of the Jepson project. Phase 1 is just accepted a year or 2 ago. It seems like, I don't know, a couple of years ago. Phase 2 is under construction today and it's just paved. And they're both in there already to widen. Is that correct?
So
Or
basically, you gotta remember that all the accounting is based upon, so the purpose of this was just to update our costs for the traffic. Because of the significant cost increase, we kept all the projects the same, we kept how much money, our account balance, and all of those things the same. So we are not showing, we didn't go back and say, well, how much revenue do we have right now? What is our actual account balance? All we were doing for traffic was updating the unit costs and the projects.
well, no, sorry, I'm saying that we have one under construction, one that just finished, and we're showing that going to a 6-lane and doing a widening and including all those costs in the TIF. If I'm reading it correctly, is that right? That is in the TIF program to add the, I'll call it 5th and 6th lanes
Correct.
already. Oh my gosh. Is that, I guess, so I'll ask the question again, is that warranted? Is there really a need for those lanes in a traffic study?
It
Or 2035?
is.
Is that the end of the horizon or?
No, our horizon is built out minus the northeast side.
I thought Carroll, was supposed to be the overflow for the 4-lane and that the people did not want a 6-lane.
So Carroll Way is a 2-lane collector that you have houses that front on, and honestly, what Carroll's gonna do is basically, if you're east of Leisure Town, allow you to go north and south without having to go out to Leisure Town. The only reason why people would divert from Leisure Town on Carroll Way is if there's a major accident. Because otherwise it will be significantly longer and you're driving in, neighborhoods that you have pedestrians, bicyclists, and it will be a lot slower. So it's not really a, even though there was, talk of that, what it does is it provides, Carroll Way is good planning, it provides connectivity so that traffic doesn't have to go out to Leisure Town, that they can actually circulate a turn.
I understand that. I just struggle with a project that's not done building, that we're saying needs to be widened already, and let's add, I don't know the cost, whatever it is, you know, and start collecting money. Well, presumably, we've already been collecting money if it's been in the program to widen the road that's not even done building yet, you know, and
Like I said, the land use is built out much northeast area. So northeast area was not included in the land use because of how much infrastructure was needed for both sewer, water, transportation to be able to be feasible. So that has to be a little bit more like a campus type of project, because there's a lot of infrastructure that's needed. So that's why that area was included, but it's built out of the remaining part of the city.
and then one of the last points is, I would presume Jepson Phase 1 has come out of the program now, it's complete and it's not.
There's only a couple of minor things that were, that we still had on the books when we were going through it last time, that we had,
But it's minor closeout stuff,
Yeah, closeout
but
stuff.
you know, it's not a $30 million line
No.
item. So, and my question would then pertain to Jepson Phase 2 and potentially any other in progress project where Jepson Phase 2, if I read correctly, still had 40 some odd $1 million in there, which presumably most of that project is paid for, it's paved as of now. I think they're down to landscaping and other work. Is a chunk of that money supposed to come out as a, you know, if a project's done, it comes off the list. Well, what happens to a project that's 75% done?
so this kind of goes back to the pay-as-you-go model, which is how cities collect fees, how they administer them, and then provide it to a particular project. So Jepson is still in process. We're still working on collecting fees, and we use, so you don't have a bank account for each project, which we went over. So basically, I collected fees and I use that to build Jepson as opposed to, you know, the Browns Valley White
Sure.
type of thing.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I still have to collect fees for Browns Valley, so it's still not completed and done. And keep in mind, all we were doing for traffic was we were updating our unit costs because our unit, we have seen significant increases in what our projects are coming in as. And it's not just our city, everywhere.
Well, I understand that, but I would assume over the last couple of years, maybe one or two projects actually been completed and now have come off the list. I didn't look in detail since the last update. And, you know, I think it still begs the question, if you had a $40 million project on the books and you've already expended 30 million, you know, you've been paying the contractor monthly, right? Wouldn't 30 of the $40 million project come off the books when you do the update? Otherwise, for instance, Jepson Phase 1 is a good example. Maybe there's $50,000 in project closeout. Well, you didn't leave the entire $40 million job on the books. You only left the 50,000 remaining. Wouldn't that logic apply to Jepson Phase 2 or any other project for that
Jepson
matter?
Phase 1 started this process and such. And when we were doing it, like, the account balance in like 2020, we just left on like our loan to the STA, et cetera.
Sure.
So,
And I think any loan payment would remain. If there were a loan on Phase 2, I think it would need to similarly. I don't understand how that money would come off, I guess, at some point. I mean, the city could potentially, you know, leave the last $50,000 of a project on and then carry forward the entire project cost, millions of dollars, and say, well, it's not done yet. And we still need to be paid for the entire $8 or $10 million, even though it's only got this little $50,000 of work left at the end is where I'm heading, you know. We went crazy with the idea, which I don't think anybody's doing that, but
We have an FAQ on our webpage that talks about how projects, equipment, and facilities are determined for inclusion in the DIF. I think in response to your question, when do they get removed? Like, what has been completed and when is a project removed from the DIF is a good one. So I think that's something we can look into and address, because I think it's also a fair one. You're trying to, at the last meeting, there were a lot of questions about why are these projects in the DIF, on what basis are they included? We developed a responsive FAQ that tried to lay that out in like layman's terms. You all are experts, some people are not. We can add a piece about the accounting for projects when they're completed.
well, and it's, I think and presume projects, if I went back and looked at when they're completed, they come off, right? I presume that happens. My question is really related to in process and what happens if there's a project 80% done when you do the diff update? Is the entire project cost move forward or is it only the 20% remaining? That's the question.
I'm understanding his question somewhat, but I also see that
So
it's, sounds
here-
like it's
here's the
complicated.
thing is, theoretically, when the project's done, it comes off, but it doesn't come off until the diff's updated again. It's still on the list. So we had, so when I started this, whenever I started it, previous time that it was, the diff was completed was 1992. Those were all the projects that were currently on the diff.
Got it.
And so from there, when I went and updated the report, they were removed. And actually, it wasn't that they were removed. What we did was we looked at, we have a general plan, local service policy, and we have road widenings in the general plan. So what we did was we did modeling based upon our, what the land use growth was gonna be, where we would see impacts for traffic, and then what the projects were. And then we laid out all the projects of, this is what we need for, right turn lane, left turn lane, or 2 left turn lanes, where we, will actually need traffic signals, et cetera. So that's when all the other projects left the diff.
It's kind of like, I don't know, you're saying there's like a rolling lag, if you will, to it,
So
is what you're
what it
saying.
is, it's a snapshot in time. This is what our land use is, these are the projects we need, right, and then when we go, and this process was only supposed to be a minor update to correct a couple things, parks around, and readjust all our cost estimates. So we weren't going back and remodeling everything and determining the layouts. So that's part of the reason why it's still on it, because the snapshot is just being updated for our costs. And a couple corrections.
Well, and you're leading me right into another question is, when we see these fee increase amounts on the typical 2,500 square foot home of 80, 125%, whatever they are on each category, is that being related to what the current fee is today, or is that to the 2022 amount? Like, and where I'm heading is with the annual increases that occur.
So
That's where I'm.
it's on one of the slides.
Is that compared to if I pulled a building permit this morning? Is it an 85% increase on that police line item? I think was 85% compared to today, or was it a percent increase to 20?
It's the existing diff today, the 2022 diff in $2025. That's what the comparison is.
Got it.
And actually in the report, it's,
In the election.
yeah, it's one of the first tables that has, yep.
Okay,
So if you want to look, it's table 1.3 cents.
okay. And so, and this is where I understand. Believe me, I hear from builders about all the time, for a lot of them about the cost increases and everything else that have been coming over the past years. Now, those increases, we're saying are COVID, supply chain, and a bunch of other things. And yet the fees are updated every year and increased every year based on a construction cost index, right? That would capture all of the unit increases we see due to supply chain, COVID issues, material supplies, whatever else, right? And so it's an increase on top of an annual increase that already captures all the items that are being explained to us, is what I'm saying.
Theoretically, we would hope that happened, and so our agency is no different from any other agency that we have, like CCI that we use for an ENR to increase the costs every year. But those percentages haven't matched what we're seeing in the items with how much the construction is actually costing us.
Yeah, those rates are much lower, the ENR rate, from what we've seen over the last 3 years on our projects.
It's not an
I
accurate
understand.
index, is what you're
It's
saying.
much lower than what we've seen over the last 3 years.
I mean, and there's just so many unknowns that are going on, especially with what's going on with tariffs, being able to actually get equipment, buy America when we're required to comply with that.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, the explanation, I'm like, well, wait, that should be captured in the construction cost index, which should be monitoring actual construction costs. I guess I don't understand then why you're saying it's not really coupled with the cost you're seeing. Why is it not? Is now my question, I guess, that the claim is it's not an accurate index in what you guys are seeing here.
Well, we use that as ENR, the engineers.
It's the Bay Area ENR.
Right.
Adjustment, yeah, right.
And it's been much
That's the
lower.
highest around.
It might be on that report, but actual numbers from what we've seen over the last 3 years, when we advertise projects, it's been much lower. Much lower.
Well, we haven't seen the cost in construction go up that much that we're talking about, so.
As Gwen pointed out earlier, or might be in, our costs are when we advertise a project, that low bidder, that's our cost. There's no chance to negotiate a cost. It's advertised and low bid, that's the cost. So in the development world, that cost might be different because you can negotiate. We don't have that opportunity as a city.
The different environmental regulations that costs. I don't know that accounts for the whole delta between, but I think there are layers of costs on top of this.
It's always that way. I understand that. I don't know that the magnitude, I suppose, is, like you said, fully covered or understood why a developer, private build would see such a discrepancy in costs.
Yeah, can I add to that too? I mean, even amongst the publics and otherwise, I mean, most of the developers we're using or contractors are prevailing wage too. So if we're talking about, just say 5% from 2018, so we've got, 35% increase just with the cost increases, and you're saying another 85%. I mean, our costs certainly haven't gone up in that period of time, with the same contractors. I mean, and not by anywhere near that. So I think, Vince touched earlier on a couple of our questions is, I know not every line item you have, but certainly the city's done a number of projects. And even if you didn't have the line item, you can kind of extrapolate a cost based on what that is. So I think that was a question for me when you see 20 grand per unit of fee increases, is how much of that is based on just, an estimate provided from someone that was looking at projects that aren't relevant to what's actually happening here today. And so, looking back to at 2022, there's a chart when you did that last fee update that talks about the city's fees relative to other communities. And, apart from one specific city in Contra Costa, Vacaville is at the top of that list, right? So adding more fees on top of that, further pushes it. It's not really talked about as part of this, but, Vacaville has a very high CFD, right? Any project we're building now, even before we get out the door, is 1.6, 1.7% of home value. I mean, it's expensive. So we're talking about middle missing class, it's, the fees are one part of it, adding costs, CFDs currently, I mean, it's just incredibly unaffordable, and it's going to impact a number of things here. So, just having the time, I think, on our end to review some of that is going to be helpful. I tried to look online for the city website for kind of the fee exhibit that was here. I didn't see it on there, but that's something to be taken a look at as well. So.
I don't know, I mean, just to transparency, I don't know that we'll be able to get anything published again before the meeting on the 20th. It's such a quick turnaround. We'll try,
Why was that one only 5 days away from this one? I know
We
it's
wanted to
so
have a
quick.
trio. We actually envisioned that the first meeting, the one that happened on April 28th, would be more like this one. That staff would be able to present information, gather questions, and then just be a little more of a stronger start. So this meeting has been kind of what we envisioned, like we were able to get more information up, we got some initial feedback, and we're evolving. We just picked these dates in advance because we wanted to get them on people's calendar. We didn't want you to meet with us during the Memorial Day time off, we'll kind of disappear on. It's not the final meeting we're having. We can have another meeting if we need that. We just wanted to get these on the books. There was a planned rhythm of meetings leading us to the council meeting.
Well, and I've expressed to both of you, like, it's a 104, if I recall, page report, but that report points to the Park and Rec Master Plan, which is a big document to chew through. It points to this document, that, and then there's a slew of exhibits and cost estimates and unit costs and, you know, to chew through it. And this is not my full-time job to review fee studies. I do other things with my time.
What else
As
you
an
doing?
engineer, yeah.
Are
You
you
know, this guy
sleeping?
has me working, he has me working, he, and everybody here has me working on something. But to the point is, you know, it's a lot and really only kind of hitting hard on diff and parks and all, or excuse me, TIF, traffic and parks, because those were some of the bigger increases to date. And, you know, with only a couple weeks, even is kind of tight in between meetings and only 5 days for the next one. You know,
If there's general consensus,
No.
we could move the third meeting to a different date now that we're going to council on 5/27, just with an overview and a roadmap for how we're gonna bring them up to speed on what is a div, how does it work, and then eventually in the summer, or later in the summer, we're gonna be doing the more substantive discussions.
What-
We're open to that.
was there a need to have the last meeting before that informational?
We really just wanted to make sure, just like the last time Gwen led the 30-year update, we had meetings every Monday, I wanna say for like, I don't know, 10 weeks or something. Cause that was the 30-year update, so it just wanted to like a weekly meeting. We were trying to be thoughtful that we would probably need to have a series of meetings, but again, there's no magic to the 20th, it was just what we planned ahead to know that we'd have a time to reconnect with you. We could even keep that meeting date as a chance for people who have questions to come in and meet with us, and then plan another one for when you all have more time to dive into this body of work. We're very much willing to do that.
I'll let the other development team in the meeting chime in. My preference would be to push it out simply because I hear parks, and I know I had several items I was gonna bring up today, some of which are still pending, I think, and it sounds like the Parks Department is doing a whole lot of work. You know, I'd love to see that before we meet again, have a chance to actually review it, see what the new, and I'm sure these folks, being one of the biggest increases, would like to see what their revision does to the actual cost, you know, just my 2 cents.
I think the approach, in terms of what we were taking to council and how that's now changed a bit, means on the 27th, they'll basically be catching up to where we are now. And so I don't see a problem with pushing the next meeting so that we have that with council, that's just kind of breaking.
Okay with that?
Yeah.
I'd like to,
That'd be great.
I think I'd like to keep the meeting on the books because we have it on our calendars. And if you're someone who is seeing this link for the first time or wasn't, because I know you haven't been getting notified every time we change something. We've been doing sometimes every couple day updates to develop the document. That way, on the 20th, less than 5 days from now, we can come back together, maybe not with so much of a formal agenda, but at least talk through any questions you have. And then meanwhile, I'll work with Brian's team and our consultants to find another date where we can be ready to talk in more detail about the parks information that will be on the website and then some of the other more substantive topics.
Is there a time frame for when parks thinks they'll have revised information? I want to make sure it's not 24 hours before.
We
the
do two
fifth
updates,
meeting,
so that's
you know,
a, yes, agreed.
Yeah, that's where I would,
We're not managing the development impact fee update. Or just one component of it, so we're kind of reliant on when in her timeframe. So as we receive more information, I actually just started evaluating information after the last meeting.
If we can settle on when, we can talk internally and figure out when we're gonna have the information. Is like 2 weeks after we release the information a reasonable time period, for a first discussion? I mean, I know you don't want 3 days.
That'd be totally.
Okay, so we'll work together and figure out when we can provide the parks information, and then we'll find a date that's 2 weeks after when we can post it on the webpage. And that way you all have time to dig into it and we can have a more informed discussion.
So, and in that case, because that kind of got me through TIP, I presume that the parks people have seen my emails and specifically the rec list, where those costs were coming from, any sort of project scopes and estimates for those, trail costs, and park design and construction costs were all questioned. And so, and whether that's with you or Gwen or EPS or multiple places, I don't know, but those were all the questions, and I'll give you guys a fair chance to read through it. A steal.
Is it possible to ask a question? Sorry, I don't know how to raise my hand online. I haven't found the button. Would it be fair to say that the costs are being presented in a manner in which the city is assuming that they build every facility and at the high, at the highest cost, because my expectation would be some of these facilities, including parks and roads and other facilities, would be built by the private sector using your guys' bid requirements and building them and receiving credits. And there seemed to be an acknowledgement or an expectation that the private sector may be able to build some of these facilities more cost effectively. And I'm just wondering if that is something that could be factored in or at least discussed as council, that the assumption is that the city is using their cost structure to build all of these, even though the expectation is the development community is going to build many of them.
For the traffic impact fee, it's assumed that the city, we're using our costs, because we're using our big costs for the projects.
And do you know how many of the facilities are expected to be built by private development versus the city?
Honestly, certain projects, like Back Valley 505 improvements, that's going to be built by the city. Leisure Town going from 4 to 6 lanes will probably be built by the city. If you have intersection improvements, they most likely will be built by the city, but we did not go through an analysis because it's really hard to determine now what projects will or will not be built. At least for traffic. Parks and Rec is another thing. They will ultimately, they're going to put together what the policy is for turnkey parks.
I can answer that question now. The general plan actually has a policy that we do try to negotiate with developers when they are preparing specific plans and development agreements to try to get them to build the parks, in particular neighborhood parks and community parks. So that is the objective. And then in turn, we would prepare a park agreement with the developers to credit them the fee that is proportionate to that amenity. So essentially, we would then be compensating you the development impact fee that we collected from you.
And does the city policy reimburse you for actual costs or for the amount that was in the fee program?
So that's actually one of the critical reasons that we have to update the fee. It wasn't updated for 30 years. And whenever the city's been responsible for building the parks, we've been subsidizing to some extent the building of the parks. And we have to be in a position where we can leverage having enough money where if the developer isn't inclined to want to enter into an agreement with the city to build the park, we have enough money to actually follow through with building the park. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, kind of, I suppose.
Well, I'll just say my experience has been actual costs,
It's
but
the actual cost on sewer and water.
is it sewer and water? Is it that way on TIF projects?
Yes. Yeah, you can't pay more than the actual cost of the project.
The realized cost by the developer?
Yes.
Yes.
It's not been that for parks because the park fee wasn't updated for 30 years and a lot of the parks that have been recently built, it was a fraction of the construction cost. So I know that for sure.
But you would never, if a project built a park, and let's say it's a $5 million build and the fees, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here. If the fees did not add up to if the project paid less in fees than the actual cost, they would still build the park and they just would not pay any fees on the project. You know, if it's a 500 lot subdivision and it collected X millions of dollars and the park actually cost a little more than what they paid in fees, they still build it and the city would collect zero on those lots in that case. If I'm saying that right, sorry. If it costs more, the park built cost more than the fees collected, which is what you're saying happens, right? For a particular project that had parkland in it. And the developer would build it, and if it cost them a little more, it cost them a little more, there's no way to credit them for the, let's say, $500,000 overrun, if you will.
only know what I've seen. I've been with the city about 4 years, and all of the development agreements for the parks that are being built now were executed well before my time. So I can only speak to the things that are happening right now that I've reviewed, and we haven't had sort of a template for how we do it. All developments are different to some extent. But what I have seen is that when a developer has indeed taken on the responsibility or has it in their agreement that they're responsible for executing on the building of the park, the park fee agreements that I've seen have compensated them for the portion of the park if that was collected for that particular category of park.
Got it. And there's the split between neighborhood and.
Correct.
Biggest stuff.
It's neighborhood park, community park. Yeah.
You have that ratio spelled out.
That's correct.
Yeah, I understand.
I mean, this might be a question for Typhoon, but shouldn't, following Nexus law, if you can, let's say a facility is $10 million, whether it's a road, park, or otherwise, and the developer constructs it for $8 million, that they would get, under the city's policy, $8 million of credits, and then subsequently the city should have their Nexus study reduce the cost of that facility by $2 million, and vice versa. If it costs the developer $12 million, the city's only going to give them $10 million in credits, but it should be put in the city's next update to the Nexus study, adding the $2 million and giving them a long-term reimbursement.
Yes.
I think that's a good question. And I don't fully know. I think I'm learning kind of the different ways it's being done, but I think that's something we should talk about as a city group, is just to make sure we understand how it's doing, and to your point, if there are direct cost savings being brought by developers taking it on, what is the implication for how the Nexus study works? So we'll think about that.
And I believe that's what we're doing now, is basically taking a, not project by project basis, but the accumulation over time. You're collecting money for all these projects, you come to either we have a surplus or a deficit to meet the requirements of development. And so you adjust the fees accordingly. As it turns out, we have obviously a small deficit, so we have to increase the DIP fee to cover that, because projects can come in over what we initially anticipated. If we came in today and we actually had a surplus in the different accounts, we wouldn't be asking for more money. There may be a DIP reduction.
Yeah, I mean, I might be careful about how I would phrase that, because I would interpret what you just said to be implying the new development subsidizing past issues of the city, but I don't think that's what you intended to say, but I think it could be interpreted that way.
No, not at all. It's just that not past issues of the city. It's just the actual projects that were developed through the DIP and funding those projects. And it's not done on a project by project basis. It's like Glenn said earlier, it's a snapshot in time.
Thank you.
Are you talking, Justin, specifically for water and sewer?
Yeah,
Had a deficit in those
that's my
funds?
realm.
Got it. But you're bringing up a question, so I presume every one of the other sections of the report, if there's a positive balance carried forward, it's reflected in there?
Yes.
Okay.
So what we do is we look at what our account balance is, a snapshot of time,
Uh-huh.
and then that's accounted for with, oh, we need to collect more, widening of just park layer.
Right. Was water and sewer the only one with a deficit? Do you know? And if the others were all
We have actually
positive?
a deficit in the accounts. It was just, we don't have enough money at the current rate that DIP is being collected to fund all of the projects. So therefore, that is what precipitated the increase in the rate. If all the projects summed up equated to exactly what we had projected to collect and what we had cash on hand, then
Be a zero
it'd be a
increase.
zero. So it's
Sure.
basically doing the true up accounting.
I have a question from Todd on Zoom.
Thank you very much. I appreciate all the questions and comments in Clifton. I guess I was thinking that just listening to all the debate, there's some things that are in the general plan that the city continues to point to that say these are in the general plan. And so therefore we're preparing our fee program to accommodate them. It might be worthwhile to consider perhaps talking some of those things through with the council when you get to that point, maybe not at the initial meeting, but evaluating what things in our general plan are really needed and maybe some things that aren't. For example, Vaca Valley Parkway extension. And is that needed? Will it ever happen? And should that be something that could come out of the fee program? And I'm just using that as an example, but the city taking the initiative, the city staff taking the initiative to look at some things and advising the council, because I don't think they're going to really know what to do. And so talking to them about how that perspective might work. And the other thing that was kind of in the back of my mind or grinding on me a bit was the whole Leisure Town Road discussion. And I'm just looking at things practically and saying, there is a ton of construction that's going on out there right now. And there's projects that are being built on one side of the road and development that's existing on the other side. And I'm just looking to see, how are you going to fit another 2 lanes on that road? Are you going to rip things out that you're building today and then redo it all? It just doesn't seem practical to me. So those are some of the things that I would ask the city to consider, to look at the details of how that's going to work and talk it through, so that we're all clear on how we understand all of that. So thanks for your time.
I think feasibility of the projects that are on the list is going to be something that's part of the discussion with council, but I hear you on, if staff can bring recommendations based on what they've experienced, what they're seeing currently. I think that's a valuable data point for council, so we'll work on that.
Yeah, you guys are the smartest people in the room on, what's going on citywide, well, arguably. And so, providing some feedback to the council and saying, these are things that we think as a staff make sense to us. I think they'll listen to that.
Slides, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, if there are no more questions on.
I just have one more question. How were the soft costs calculated? Like, how was that determined as part of this?
Basically, it was done a few years ago, and what they did was they took what our actual costs were. They took projects, whether they were large or small, et cetera, and then it's broken up. I have a PowerPoint. I can write something up and put it on the website for how the soft costs are developed.
Just wondering, like, relative to the actual soft costs of some of the projects that are being paid, if that's also pulled just as a percentage from something else versus what the city's actually doing on its actual
So
projects.
basically what they did was they looked at different projects that they have done historically in the city and actually what the costs were for like environmental design, inspection, and they came up with a percentage for each. And that's how they added it up. And that's how the soft costs were developed. I'm not gonna go over these slides about the developer review process improvements or from the last deck, but in between the last meeting and this one, we have published the developer review process improvement report that they prepared. You probably have not had time to look at it. I sent the link out this morning. I realized it wasn't included in the email. I feel like these meetings, last 2 meetings have been very focused on the fee update for very valid reasons. What I'd like to do is ask you as a group of people that are interested in how the city provides service to our development customers, how we process your applications, that you take a look at the report that's online, digest it. I will work with Public Works. We'll schedule a follow-up meeting for the fee topic. I'll also schedule a separate focused meeting just on the development review process improvements initiatives. I think it will warrant its own time. Just at a high level, the report basically culminates in 23 recommendations. Like there's these 23 specific recommendations that Baker Tilly had about how we can improve our development process. Internally, I've taken a stab at taking the 23, some of which seem to be kind of competitive and or related to others. I've grouped them into 14 specific kind of action areas. And I have an internal draft going at the city about what should be the things we say we can do in 0 to 3 months from when the council directs us, like what can be done now or quickly, what might take about 6 months to do, and what are longer term things. So if you all, as your homework from this meeting, can locate the report, and again, we'll publish it and some other links to follow up to this meeting for anyone who did not get that earlier today. But if you could take a look at Baker Tilly's report, read through it, take it in, and think about what are the changes the city can make, like quickly, in your opinion, that would make things easier, better, more predictable, faster for development. And then what are the things that you think might take longer? We'll present you our list. I have, as I said, I prepared a draft action plan that I need to send out to a broader internal audience. But I guess the key thing to know is all the recommendations that are in the draft action plan totally come from the Baker Tilly report. So again, I want to give the process improvements the time that they are due. This is a council priority. It's something the council said they wanted to get done as part of their strategic plan. We've finally done the work and we're ready to talk to you about it. So I will invite everyone to a follow-up meeting, probably in early June, not Memorial Day week. So we can get together and really dive into it. But that's what I want to say about that. Are there any questions about the report, or has anyone looked at the report and have any initial feedback?
So the link you sent out
Yeah,
a few hours ago?
exactly. Yes, it was
Okay.
put up last week or week before, but it's, yes, like a few hours ago.
Not yet.
Not yet?
But I'll see
Okay,
you.
okay, good. Thank you. Okay, and then the last topic I have is about the fee ordinance. The ordinance has been on the webpage for many weeks now. I haven't received any questions or comments about it, and that's okay. I understand that people's bandwidth is frankly being taken up by the development impact fee update. I would just say that I would love it if at minimum, if you're someone who builds things in Vacaville regularly, at minimum, look at the ordinance summary. We have a table that summarizes current ordinance that's been in effect for 30 years, new ordinance, like what the differences are. That's how you'll kind of get a feel for, is there anything here that you're concerned about, that you believe that the city, is the table I was talking about on the left, the ordinance is very long and it's shown on the right. If there's anything that you get flagged on, then that would then lead you to want to get into the 15-page ordinance and really look at it closely. I don't think, and from a staff perspective, we don't think there's anything in here. There's no like bombs or grenades or surprises that we think are bad or are going to negatively affect development. The whole goal has been to streamline it, make it more direct, make it more simple, make it easier to administer. But again, I want to take this to council in June for an initial first reading and to launch it. I just want to make sure that you all have found a little time to look at it and let us know if there is anything you're concerned about.
One thing jumps in my mind, I probably should know this, is to the idea of fee agreements or fee reimbursements for TIFs and park builds or any other thing in the larger DIF program. Does the ordinance speak to those?
It speaks to fee reimbursements.
It does.
And what it does not get into in a related topical area is it sets the table for implementing programs through resolution to do additional fee deferrals, fee reductions, and other creative things. But this ordinance is not that level of implementing detail. It's more about kind of setting the table for those things to follow. But yes, it does speak to reimbursements. And I would suggest, I can't from memory conjure up exactly what it says, but that's an area that I suggest you look at. It is only 15 pages. It actually was longer when we first started. So, I mean, it's only 15 pages of legal speak, but
The engineer will take 3 weeks to get through it. I want to understand how.
some of its
probably-
definitions though, and actually, you know, if as a
Sure.
planner, a professional planner, definitions are and lawyers, definitions are at the heart of every ordinance. So that part's kind of easy reading, and then it gets, you know,
The
tedious.
summary
after that.
table, I think, is very helpful and condenses much of the unnecessary stuff.
Okay.
Out, so summary table. I think, would be-
Got it. Does the ordinance address, I know there's been the idea for quite a while now of impact fee deferral to final or occupancy or one of the two, I don't know
Yes,
which.
That comes out of state law, so we're always going to comply. with
Yeah,
that,
it
whether-
addresses it.
Is that,
Yeah.
has the ordinance been updated already or is that a part of the update?
A part of it, and so to the extent if we ran into a situation where our current ordinance, like came in tomorrow and asked that question, our current ordinance would allow us to comply with state law, we obviously go with the state law route, so.
You
we
would
have that
defer.
ability now. Yes,
Okay.
so we would
The new
always-
ordinance is the compliant with state law now. It does allow residential.
Got it. And that only affects the impact fee portions, not the other service fees, or is that?
That's correct.
Okay.
We have a question online from Josh.
Yeah, at the last meeting, we discussed at what point are the new fees gonna be effective on our permit applications? For our Montesa project, I have all of the plot plans and building permit apps in. If these fees are effective 7/1, we pull the permits come August. Am I subject to the new fees, or is it from when I applied?
Thank you, Josh, for that question. We talked about this a little earlier. We will put together options for the council about when the fees would go into effect. Gwen shared that last time, it was a 30-year update. The fees started going into effect about a year later, except for we let people choose their own adventure and pick the lower fee for that first year on our residential projects. There is no appetite for staff to recommend anything to the council that just abruptly changes the fees for midstream projects. So I think that you should know that. The one thing that I just want to mention, since you're asking this question about things that haven't been issued yet, is that the triennial building code update is coming and we will have to get it to council this year. It has to go into effect on Jan 1. So if you are a builder who wants to build under the current building code, fire code, all the stuff that's currently in place, you should get ready to pull those permits this calendar year before the new code goes into effect. That should be the driver, not the impact fees. I don't think there's a scenario where the impact fees are going to come get you.
And I think Josh, sorry,
I have a
I just
second
wanted to
question.
add. Oh, can I just really quick, the July 1st date that I think you're referencing, to the extent you've been hearing about that in the news around the city, that was specific to water and sewer usage.
Yeah.
And so that totally untethered from the diff. I think there's a 0% chance that the diff is, ready by July 1st. So.
Okay. Understood. On our land side, we have our SB 330 application on Vanden Cove, and from what my land department says, the SB 330 locks in the fee effective at the time of the application. So in those projects, are they going to be subject to any of these updates?
No, so, and I will say just a very minor but important tweak, a complete application is subject to lock in at the time of a complete application. And so just to, make a clean record on that. But yes, that's correct. It locks in as of the date of the complete application. And then you have 180 days to submit to us your full, because as you know, the SB 330 is a very limited set of information for your entire project. So, but yes, that is the purpose of it, is to lock in the fees as of the date of the complete application.
So our permits, when we're pulling 2 years down the road, will still be at 2025's rates?
I think there may be a little more nuance than just saying permits generally, but I'm happy to include this in a subsequent discussion or to put up an FAQ that's specific to how SB 330 plays in with this.
Okay, perfect.
One more question as far as the impact fee deferral to, is it occupancy or final inspection? I know those are usually very close. Okay, whatever it is. And you said you're already practicing that due to state law. That's just for my education. Is that only applicable to residential permits?
Yes,
That's correct.
Okay, so an industrial or commercial office, they don't have that deferral.
The council did approve a fee deferral program through resolution. I want to say it was last year or earlier this year, that does apply to certain non-residential projects. Something that my colleague Don Burris put together and took for them. But it's something that we've been tasked by our outgoing city manager. So I guess he'll be outgoing in about a week, but we've been tasked with putting together a more robust fee deferral program for targeted industries. It's just from bandwidth issues. I'm trying to get the ordinance done, and then that gives us time to go back and really look at where it makes sense for the city to defer impact fees for non-residential projects and where it doesn't. And the tension's always going to be, we got to build stuff to serve these non-residential projects. So we defer everything. We never have the money to build what we need. But at the same time, the council's been clear that we want to incentivize companies to come here and build their headquarters in Vacaville. And we want to provide ways to make that beneficial to them.
Got it. But the state law portion specific to residential, you do accommodate a few others for a year ago or whatever. Okay. Well, believe it or not, I do work for.
So I'll just wrap up for us here. So obviously we have more questions now. It's the time we're happy to take them. Otherwise, we will follow-up, I mean, I have a whole page of notes here, so we're gonna be working on updating or adding more to the FAQ site. Everything I believe is on just one page, all of the different information should be posted on one page. You can get to there. We will, it sounds like we're gonna keep this May 20th meeting on, but what we will do is look at a later date that will be tied to, I think, when the parks info can be released. So you may not hear from us for a bit on when that date will be, but when we have the parks info, we're ready to release it. It sounds like we'll try and schedule the meeting about 2 weeks out from that. But we will keep the May 20th on. So if you want to come, if you just want to, maybe more like an office hours where I don't think we'll do this presentation all over again. But we're happy to be here as a staff team, answer questions, take comments. So we'll keep that on the books, and then that will be available on Zoom as well for anyone who wants to attend that way. And then we talked about this briefly, but on May 27th at the council meeting, we will take our first, I think, informational item to council about letting them know what's coming, basically. And then we're also going to be talking about CFD study and recommendations, I think, in that meeting.
Yeah, we are highlighting for the council series that we're bringing them over the course of the summer and early fall. We were still working on the series and the exact timing. So as soon as we have that information, we're going to share it with you. But the council will be taking literally no action on May 27th. They're more receiving an overview of how we're going to bring them a bunch of information about important development topics over the course of the next 3 to 5 months.
As part of what we're working on, and we talked about earlier, right, is the city able to put that example of like the per foot so we can see the break even point or how to try and look at that, the near term for like this 20th?
Still working on the fees until we get the park stuff.
Yeah, I was gonna say that was an important one.
Yeah, we can't do any.
But we can provide that when we have the information. We can go on. Brian would be here today. He had a personal thing. If you had to attend, so I just want to let you know, it wasn't late that he's not here. So you can contact him, you can contact me. You've got Andy Branham, you all still know how to get a hold of Gwen. We will be in touch soon with an email announcement that will announce those next meetings. We just need to figure out the parks one, and then we'll get in touch with all of you. Thank you all for being here. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
That was a good question.
We